Hello, listener, and welcome to this preview of our latest Patreon-exclusive episode. To continue the conversation and listen to the full episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Hello, patrons, and welcome to this patron-exclusive episode of Beyond the Screenplay. I'm Michael Tucker, otherwise known as the person who won't just shut up and leave the Andor fans on Discord alone. I'm, of course, joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
And we are talking today about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, directed by Ryan Coogler, screenplay by Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole. Okay, so a Black Panther sequel has happened and has come out yet. I was so afraid after the first one, as I am when I see anything that I love and I know they're going to make another one. And it's just like, please don't be bad. This first one was a miracle. Just like, don't be bad, don't be bad, don't be bad. And so I avoided all the trailers, all the things. I did see glimpses of the first teaser and saw some blue people. And I was like, wait, this isn't Avatar? The new Avatar?
In the water, even?
In the water? Like, what's going on? So that made me a little bit nervous. But overall, having watched it, it was long, but overall I enjoyed it quite a bit. There were some parts that I thought were really, really well done. Other parts that were like, okay, yeah, we got to do, we're in Marvel world and we have to do these things. So I think there's some really awesome things to pull out and talk about and some bumpy things to pull out and talk about. But overall, I very much had a good time with it. So those are my initial thoughts. I'm curious to hear from you guys. Trisha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, very similar. Overall, extremely positive. I had a great time watching this movie. I was very affected by the emotional core of the movie, which I think is something I want to spend like a good amount of time talking about. Mm-hmm. Because obviously there's like a big meta story about this movie that both the people making it and the audience watching it kind of has to we all have to contend with as we're experiencing the film. And, you know, kind of like you, Michael, I was very worried about how many ways this could go wrong. And there were so many. And they certainly were not able to make a completely perfect movie home run. I don't know how you would have, but there are a lot of decisions that they made here that I think were the right ones all the way down. And so I'm very, very impressed overall by the quality of the movie because I just didn't know if it would work even a little bit for me. And the fact that it does largely, in spite of a few, the superhero Marvel like shiny bouncy parts are what they are. And there's definitely some writing things that are involved in that. And there's some editing things and everyone agrees it's too long and all of this stuff. But then the thematic core of the movie, the performances are outstanding. And I just am going to praise those all day because I really, really, they just so impressed me. So overall, if you absolutely had to make this movie, this is probably the best one you could have made in a lot of ways. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. And speaking of bouncy, Alex, thoughts?
Marvel Scrooge over here. No, I really enjoyed this movie. Very similar thoughts to you guys. I mean, I think when I'm known as the Marvel Scrooge, it's because of these certain key elements that you guys are already calling out, and I think we're going to get into. But what I love about both Black Panther and this movie just as much, maybe even more so in some cases, is just the fun, totally unique, almost like fantasy world building that is taking like indigenous cultures or like in this case Mesoamerican culture and like giving that culture like an awesome sci-fi fantasy world building thing. And that's just like so fun to see like all this money thrown at that kind of a vision, which we don't get anywhere else. And it is really cool that kind of these really bold, ambitious, just neat fantasy ideas are getting to be expressed because of the Marvel brand, because of the Disney money. So I'm really happy that, you know, Ryan Coogler was able to like take that money and make these things and give us a villain like Namor. And like, it was really refreshing and really exciting to see on screen. So yeah, in general, I enjoy seeing these types of Marvel movies in particular, because they are giving me something more than the baseline kind of like paint by numbers ABC. Here's what you got to do for the Marvel movie. It's giving me this other kind of almost like the kind of thing that I normally only see in video games nowadays, like really ambitious, cool, creative world building. And these Ryan Coogler Black Panther films are going for that.
Yeah.
Lots of really cool visuals, lots of, all the things you were saying that is just like a fun aesthetic delight on top of like the emotional thematic things you were talking about, Trisha. Yeah. Brian, what about you?
Pretty similar all around. I found myself just thinking about this movie as three different things. And I think like for me as a Chadwick Boseman tribute, I thought it was just gorgeous and, you know, just so beautifully done. I never thought a production screen would make me cry. Like,
dude, like, it was all I could do to stop from just like sobbing in the theater. Or like that was just
because like I knew it was going to open, you know, with a T'Challa funeral. Like, of course it is, right? And I was like, but how are they going to? And I thought it was going to be like this big emotional funeral, and instead it was like we had these emotional private moments with the main characters, and then we had this big celebratory funeral, and then we had a final emotional moment with Shuri, and then you go into the production screen, and I was like, man, you did everything you could do, and then you bookend that with the end of the movie as well, you know. So yeah, that stuff I all loved. And then going to part two of my the three ways I was looking at this movie as a Black Panther sequel, specifically focusing on Shuri's state of mind, you know, her anger and the fallout of there not being a Black Panther, and some of the sort of, you know, Wakanda is now known to the world, and what does that mean? Like, I thought all that was really interesting. And then finally, and this is kind of what you guys were talking about, as a just Marvel movie, Marvel Avatar crossover, I thought it was fine. I found myself caring way less about some of that stuff. You know, the antagonist and some of the big, you know, Marvel-y action scenes and some of that side story stuff. I think there's an interesting stuff in there. But I found myself going, oh man, I really miss hanging out with the Dora Milaje right now. I really miss seeing what Shuri is feeling right now during those moments. And it just felt like, oh, we have to also make a Marvel movie, right? And I'm like, man, like how ballsy would it have been if they were like, nope, we're just making like a movie about Wakanda in the sort of aftermath of you know, what kicks this whole movie off. But yeah, excited to get into all of that. But overall, as you guys said, just positive thoughts in general, and had a really good time with it.
Yeah, I think kind of breaking it into those kind of different movies, that this movie has to be all of them. And as you were saying, Trisha, it's quite a lot of things to have to navigate, and that they were able to it all is a huge feat. But yeah, so I think that opening funeral, like you were detailing very nicely there, Brian, was so affecting and really sets up, it's doing the meta work that we all know has to be done because of Chadwick Boseman's passing. And it's also setting up Shuri's state of mind. And I feel like those emotional scenes, especially early on with her and her mother, and when they go out, you know, to the bush and they're sitting by the river, like there's some pretty like raw emotion, honest conversations between them that I was really pleased to see that they like went to those depths. And there was like kind of there's some line that Shuri said of, I think it's when her mother is like, you know, I came out here and I grieved and I found, you know, your brother in the wind and in the nature and stuff. And Shuri's just like, that was a construct in your head. Like, I'm sorry, but like, that's just your brain doing brain things. So I thought that was bold, but also then the moms come back to that of like, does your construct bring you like peace, or, you know, I forget what she says exactly, but, you know, the opposite of peace. Anyway, I feel like all those things I was really happy that the movie made room for them, and that they were supported by these amazing, dedicated performances like throughout. And so I think that was my favorite part of this movie, is that it got to be a really interesting, honest meditation on grief and what do you do with life being unfair, and just all of that I thought was really, really well done and well observed.
Well, and that's like, to me, that's all I remember from this movie. Or like every time I'm like thinking back on it again, you know, it was only a day or two ago when I saw it, all I can see is like the faces of Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett as they're working through these things. And the ideas being expressed are complex and interesting. And I love the direction for the character of Shuri. Like, I love the skepticism. You know, we don't get a lot from her in the original Black Panther about what does she believe in the ancestors? Does she, you know, she kind of is like, technology is the way forward and not this like mysticism. But we don't get open skepticism from her about like, you know, the cultural like traditions and sort of mystical ideas that have been handed down. And the role of the skeptic suits her perfectly, and it's heartbreaking to watch in this movie. And when she, you know, she awakens later after having taken the heart-shaped herb and seeing Killmonger, which I love that choice. I love that choice.
Yeah.
Michael B. Jordan showed up and I was like, oh yes, this is exactly who Shuri needs to see.
It was so well done too, because it was like, why are you withholding? Like, what's it gonna like? And then that was really fun.
Yeah. But, and then to not show us the entire conversation between the two of them, but have Shuri wake up like truly shaken and betrayed, like feeling deeply betrayed. And they're like, who did you see? Who did you see? And she's like, I didn't see anybody. Because to her, it's the same thing as not seeing anybody, right? Like seeing somebody that's reflecting the darkest part of her, like fears and anger and, you know, desire for revenge. And, after also having lost her mother at that point, like, I can't believe this movie took out Angela Bassett's character. But it was the right choice. Like, again, there are so many bold, I think, correct choices here that come together to express the story's theme. And the journey of Shuri's character from this, like, essentially feeling lost, betrayed, left behind by her ancestors, her faith, like, all of this stuff that she wants so desperately to be connected to. Because, God, wouldn't the worst thing have been if she takes that heart-shaped herb and, like, digital Chadwick Boseman is there?
Right.
It just would have been...
I was bracing myself the whole time. I'm like, they better not fucking do this.
That's partially why the reveal of Michael B. Jordan was so exciting.
Yes, thank God.
Well, I was like, you have the actor who plays T'Chaka. You could have had him. You could have had Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
Like, there were options that you could have gone with. I was really, really hoping we weren't going to get digital Chadwick Boseman. But then to bring Killmonger in was, again, genius. So all of this, and then the climactic choice that she faces as well about whether or not to go that route of revenge and anger and like, this person, I'm going to take out my anger on the world on this person who took away my mother. And I think it's just all brilliant and really, really well done and incredibly well performed by all of the actors involved. Angela Bassett's performance here is just towering. Like, they give her a couple of different amazing monologues and she just like slams them into the ground. Amazing. Yeah.
I think the teaser trailer for this movie was really well done. And part of what made it so amazing was it was like a clip from one of her monologues. And I was like, oh God, that's so good. But, you know, I think everything you're saying, Trisha, is right on. And part of what is so brilliant about, you know, what they had to do with this movie, which is you've lost your lead actor. How are you going to carry forward with the characters that you have? And Shuri is such a great choice for a protagonist to deal with grief, because you do have other characters that are more grounded in spirituality or grounded in tradition. And those things are good for dealing with grief. Like, that is, people turn to those things when in a time of like horrible loss and grief. And Shuri, as somebody who is not plugged into those things, is going to have the farthest to go to deal with her grief. And I think it was just such a brilliant choice. If you're going to make a movie about grief, take the person that is not equipped to deal with it, because you can't think or work your way out of grief. It's like a different, deeper thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that there were a lot of choices. This movie didn't feel like they just swapped, Shuri in with T'Challa, and we're just like, well, this is our movie now. Maybe some scenes, maybe some plot point, whatever. But obviously this movie is very much like what happened in real life. Let's have that be reflected in the movie. But I was also just thinking as you were talking there, Alex, that's one benefit, which a word I use loosely, like of the Marvel kind of schematic, is you can make another Black Panther movie, right? Like if Harrison Ford dies and they're like, yeah, but we're still making a next Indiana Jones movie, we're just going to put you'd be like, what are you talking about? You can't do that, right? Like, and Black Panther, the character is Black Panther, like that. But the Marvel, the MCU is built on change. It's built on, hey, this side character is now one of the most important characters and stuff. So it's a weird, that's not something they were necessarily planning for, obviously, but it's a weird, interesting thing about this universe that at any point you can have I don't want to say minor character, but a supporting character just step up and be like, now this character is who we're focusing on. We're focusing on this story, because they've done that time and time again, right? So it's this interesting meta thing that like this franchise works better than other franchises would for the situation they had to deal with.
Well, and just as a small point, the fact that Marvel was willing to hang a $250 million movie on the shoulders of a very young Black woman actress and basically make this entire movie about women of color. Like the entire movie is about women of color. That alone was breathtaking to me. And I was thankful that they didn't just pick another male superhero or like bring in a star or, recast the character, which I know they barely considered that. But like that in itself as a business decision, not to mention as like a cultural like act of faith, is just powerful to me. And that was one of the main thoughts I had the entire time as I was watching it. I was like, thank God. And, it turned out to be a business decision that paid off, but you get the sense that there was a risk involved and they did it because it was the right thing to do. And I'm sure Ryan Coogler was a huge part of that. Mm-hmm.
I was very conscious of that also. I've talked about when watching the first Black Panther, my experience in the theater of like, does everyone, like, did Marvel know what's happening? Like, there's only Black people in this movie. Like, did they know that that's what they were doing? And so it was interesting to me watching this movie, having the thoughts that you were just saying there, Trisha, like, this is insane that like 6 years ago, like, I would have never thought that this would be a thing. Like, you're going to spend that much money on a movie with this cast and like these are the main characters. Like, that just wouldn't have been a thing. And it was almost an afterthought for me watching this movie, where like for the most part I was just watching the movie and then I would have those moments of like, wait a minute, like there have only been women of color on screen for the past whole movie, basically. Yeah. And so it was striking and cool that it was like so quickly becoming an afterthought in my head. But I think it's important to not underplay the monumentalness of that. And so I'm glad you bring that up.
But I think it is so cool that like we're now in a moment where like I genuinely wasn't thinking about that. I was just like, oh yeah, it's another blockbuster Marvel movie that is cooler than normal because it has interesting characters and takes place in interesting places. But and of course I was aware that it's indigenous cast and African cast, but I wasn't actively thinking this is impossible. How could this happen? Because it does feel possible now because of these earlier breakthrough movies. And it feels so good to be in a place where it's not like, what? This isn't allowed. It's like, no, this is like, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed this preview clip. To continue the conversation and listen to the entire episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes.